Did you know that you can now run Azure Virtual Desktop on-prem using your own existing hardware? Yes, that's correct. So last week, Microsoft announced AVD Hybrid into public preview. What AVD Hybrid is, it enables you to run Azure Virtual Desktop on-premise using your own hardware. So if you've got any existing servers, irrelevant of what operating system they're running, right? They could be running Nutanix, they could be running Hyper-V, they could be running Proxmox. It doesn't matter. So Azure Virtual Desktop Hybrid essentially enables you to register any existing virtual machines that you're running on-prem or in another cloud provider. So this can be AWS or GCP if you wanted it to. And it enables you to basically use the Azure Arc agent to register those VMs. And then once we've done that, we can then register them against the Azure Virtual Desktop host pool. And then this enables us to basically use Azure Virtual Desktop to connect to those VMs on premise. This is an absolute game changer. This is what customers have been asking for a long time. So what we're going to do in today's video, we're going to go through and show you how to deploy it. We're going to show you what it is. And then we're going to just explain the limitations as well, because there are some limitations to the service that we'll go through and explain those as well. So this is going to be a complete walkthrough guide. We're going to use Microsoft Hyper-V as an example, but this is applicable to any other hypervisor platform as well. Let's get to it. This is the Virtual Mic YouTube channel. On this channel, we review the latest news around Virtual Desktop, Nerdio, Intune, Azure, anything related to cloud computing and EUC. So if that's the type of content that you do like, then please click the like and subscribe button because it really helps me grow the channel. So traditionally, you could only run Azure Virtual Desktop in the cloud within Azure, right? Then that had its own set of challenges. These challenges are mainly due to application latency on the back end. So maybe your application database is still on-prem, which meant that if you run your workload within Azure, the performance can be really bad. It also solves problems around data sovereignty and privacy. So some companies require some applications to be held on-prem due to like contractual negotiations or data sovereignty, or maybe they just have to be there for a specific reason. So what we can now do, we can now take those workloads and run those on-prem using our own existing hardware, right? We had Azure Local previously. Azure Local was a bit difficult to set up. You had to use a certain set of validated hardware, and it wasn't easy to get up and running. So what AVD Hybrid gives us the ability to basically reuse our own existing hardware and then provision that using an OS of our choice. So all we're basically doing is give you the ability to run the virtual desktop workloads on-prem using our own hypervisor, right? So this is an absolute game changer. This is what customers have been asking for a long time. So the couple of caveats though, which I'm probably going to go through and discuss. So I guess the first one is what they've essentially done is they're giving you the ability to do this, but they won't actually take you through the whole VM provisioning process, right? So obviously within the Azure portal, you can create VMs through the Azure portal, but for this solution, they're relying on third-party partners and to do that. One of those is Nerdio. So caveat, I work for Nerdio, but they're leaving the VM provisioning process and management down to third-party vendors, okay? What I'm going to show you how on today's video is how to do this manually using Hyper-V. So I'm going to show you how to create the VM in Hyper-V. And then what we'll do is we'll go and actually register against the Azure Arc agent. We'll then register against a host pool within Azure Virtual Desktop. And then we'll connect to that VM and we'll show you what that experience is actually like as well. Okay. Other limitations that we've got with it are the kind of OS that is supported. So this does not support Windows 11 multi-session. Okay. And that's probably the biggest downer of it really. And a lot of customers are asking for that. But yeah, it doesn't support Windows 11 multi-session. We're trying to get Microsoft to change their mind. If you do want to support Windows 11 multi-session on-prem using AVD Hybrid, please let me know in the comments below, and then I'll feed that back into the Microsoft product team. So supported OSs are Windows Server OSs. So you can run like Windows Server 2016, I think is the earliest, 2022 and 2025. So it stores the RDS role for you. So at this moment in time, you would still need those RDS CALs and to run that workload, or you can run Windows 11 single session enterprise as well, right? So if you've got a bunch of single session VMs, they'll run on this environment as well. If you want to do like equivalent of multi-session, it's going to have the Server 2025 RDSH. The other limitation around is the network domain. So if you do want to run server operating system, we'll need to run that in hybrid mode, meaning that we'll need Active Directory there. I have seen a few reports of people running Enter ID Join for the single session desktops, and that seems to work okay. But you'll also need stuff like FHR6 to be run on-prem as well, right? And you can either use like Nutanix files for that, or you can set up a separate Windows file server or any other on-prem solution for your FHR profile. So just a few limitations there as well. All right. So what we're going to do now, so we're going to go deploy a virtual machine on Hyper-V, and then we're going to register it against the host pool that we're going to create. But yeah, and this will be a walkthrough guide of AVD Hybrid. All right, let's get to it. All right, so I'm at the Hyper-V console. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go and create a virtual machine, and then we'll use that virtual machine to basically test this solution out. So I'm going to go to new virtual machine, begin, and then I'm going to call this AVD Hybrid. Okay, so I'll click next. So generation 2 VM, startup memory. So we're going to use 8096. Configuring networking, so default switch. So just to be clear, this is my local machine, right? So I'm not connecting to Azure here. This is my actually local machine running Hyper-V, but this could be any operating system you want. This could be Proxmox, it could be a VM workstation, whatever you want it to, right? So all we're doing is we're just building a normal VM. Okay, so we're going to do that. So that's going to be card disk there. Okay, I'm going to install from Windows 11. So you can see here, I've got Windows Server 2025 like the one, or I'm going to use Windows 11 25H2 as an example. Okay, let's select that, select next, and then we're going to go create that. Now, caveat with Hyper-V, you actually have to create the TPM chip, otherwise Windows 11 won't boot. So we're going to do that now. Private test, click in here. Secure boot enabled, so we'll have to enable the TPM chip to get that running. I'll just click apply for that. Okay, then I'm going to go and connect to that virtual machine. You can see that's there, so it's turned off. I've already got the Windows VM, so I'm going to start that. And then I have to catch it very quickly to get it to boot. There you go, boot from VM. Right, so what that's now going to do, that's going to enable me to go and install Windows 11 on this VM. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with this whole process, but this is the process that you basically go through. So you can see here, we're having to do this manually, right? And this is the bit where you would partner up with one of our solutions to automate this whole bit, right? Because obviously you don't want to have to do this manually for hundreds of virtual machines. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to set all this stuff up, and then we're ready. I'll be back and I'll show you what we need to do to get this up and running. All right, so we've domain joined the virtual machine. We're now logged onto the VM. So what we're going to do now, we're actually going to install the Azure Arc agent. So this is monitored the PRX because essentially this is how Azure communicates with the actual VM itself. So let's go ahead and go to Azure Arc console. So we need to basically register this machine with Azure Arc. Now, there's two ways you could do this. So first way, you could do it via script. So you could automate this if you wanted to, or you could do it manually. Just to show you what the process is, I'll show you how to do it manually. So you can see here, it's basically telling us to onboard anywhere with Azure Arc. So what I'll do is I'll show you what Azure Arc is very quickly. So Azure Arc is essentially a gateway into Azure. Right? So you can register any machine into Azure Arc, and then it will pop up in the Azure console. It will enable you to use Azure to manage that VM essentially. So you can do for patching, like restarting VM, using something called VM extensions to do stuff to the VM. So if I go to all Azure Arc resources here, you can see here just some existing resources that I've been using. So these are all mostly on-prem resources that I've got. You can see that I've got some Nutanix stuff in there. I've got a server operating system. And then I've deployed this into this resource group called AVD Hybrid, and that's where all the resources sit. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we will basically go and deploy the agent. So within the Azure Arc console, I'm going to go and click on onboard create, onboard existing machines. So you can do it via the script method. So this method here will basically just generate a script for you. Okay, and then you can do that, or you can use onboard using the Windows installer, which is what we're going to go through. So I'm just going to go here and select onboard using Windows installer. That's going to download the Arc setup. So if you're running on the Windows Server operating system, that also has Azure Arc installed on it natively, so you don't need to go and do this. Okay, I'm just going to wait for that to download. Okay, the Azure Arc agent is finished downloading. So what we'll do now is we'll go and actually install this. So just to be sure, we're on the actual VM itself now. Okay, so this is running on my local Hyper-V agent. All right, so we're now going to go ahead and install the Azure Arc agent onto the virtual machine. So just to clarify, this is running on my local Hyper-V VM. and we're going to be registering this machine with the Azure Virtual Desktop host pool, and then we'll connect to that VM. All right, so going ahead and installing. Okay, configure Azure Arc. Okay, next we're going to sign into Azure. I'm already authenticated, so that's going to take me straight through. Go back to the Arc. Okay, click next. So this is where I'm going to select my tenant, my subscription, and the resource group. So this is the resource group that is going to place the resources into. Okay, so I've got this AVD Hybrid. So this is where all of my sort of Azure Arc machines sit. And then I'm going to pick Azure region, which is going to be UK South. And then we're going to use public endpoint, right? You'd use proxy server in a lockdown environment where you needed like to go through multiple firewalls and stuff. But for most environments, you're going to have public endpoint. So this is actually registering this AVD session host with the Azure Arc. So let's test the connection well. Okay, so finish. So what we should see now is if I go to this machine and get the host name, you can see here it ends in ID2. And now if we go into the Azure portal, and then if I go into Azure Arc, go to machines, we should see it pop up in here. There you go. So we can see the machine there, right? So ID2. So this is the actual VM itself. So I can go in here and I can see the domain name, Windows 11 Enterprise, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. All right. So now that we've got that, the next thing we need to do is to actually register it against a host pool, right? Now, I've already created this host pool. So what I'll show you, go to Azure Virtual Desktop, go to Manage Host Pools. So this is just a normal host pool. So you can see here it's called AVD Hybrid, and it's a personal host pool and it's persistent. Okay, nothing special about this host pool at all. It's just a standard host pool. You need to make sure that it's a validation while this is public preview. Obviously, when it comes out of public preview and GA, you won't need to do that. But for now, when you create the host pool, just make sure that you create it with a validation host pool setting within there as well. So if you go to properties, go into there, you can see there I've got oh, in fact I haven't, sorry. I'm going to set that to yes, otherwise this would have failed. So I'm going to set that as validation host pool, AVD Hybrid. So yeah, there's nothing special about this host pool. It's just a normal host pool that's been created by the portal. All right. Okay, cool. So you can see there at the moment there's 2 machines in there. We're going to create a third. I'll show you what that process looks like to register the actual session host against that host pool. Okay, so I have the script here. So this is the script which you need to run. So it's going to install some modules. So the AZ accounts and AZ desktop virtualization and AZ connected machine PowerShell modules. And then basically it will run a PowerShell command. So you can see here, we've got the install extension. So the extension which it actually creates is the cloud device extension. What this extension essentially does, it will connect into Azure. It will deploy the VM extension onto the actual VM itself. And that VM extension will go ahead and it will install the AVD agent onto the session host. And it will actually create the registration token for you. And then it register that session host against the host pool and then deploy the agent for you. That's what this script is doing. So what we'll go ahead and do now, we'll actually go ahead and we'll run this script on this VM. And then you'll be able to see it execute and then register against the host pool. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and run this. Yeah. So obviously, if you're working with one of the providers like Nerdio, for example, this is automated, right? So you can see here what we've had to do. We've had to manually create the VM and we've had to manually join it to the domain. We've had to manually run this script. So that process will be fully automated end to end if you're using a solution like Nerdio to do this process. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to click execute for that. I cannot deploy because the script is running on this system. Of course, I need to set the execution policy. So let me just unhash that. Go, save. Okay, go, run the script. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and just download everything that it needs. Okay, so now I have to authenticate against Enter ID. So I'm just going to do that now on this device. Okay, continue. Okay, I'm going to select my subscription. So that script is now completed. You can see here in the actual console itself, which deploys the Azure Virtual Desktop Cloud Device Extension. So as I mentioned, this is the bit which actually goes ahead and installs all the stuff. What we'll do is we'll actually look on the VM. We'll have a look and see if anything's actually happening. Yeah, there you go. We've got some MSI installed. So there you go. that's actually deploying the Microsoft RD Infra agent. So you can see those are actually doing that as well. So that's good. So that's all working properly. Okay. Yep. So remote desktop services infrastructure agent. So now if we head over to the console, good. See this machine pop up. There you go. Total machine's free. So that's gone up by 1. And you can see here, ID2. So that's our machine, right? And it's showing health state unavailable, total session 0. So click on the sign. We'll search for this user here. Right there. Okay. All right. So I'm now assigned to that VM. Right, what we'll do now is we'll log onto this desktop using the Windows app. So you connect to the desktop exactly the same way as you would do with running a VM within Azure, right? So it's just a Windows app that is seamless to the user, which is good news. All right, so you can see here I'm in the Windows app. I just click on this session desktop here, and this will log me into the VM. So we'll just make sure it is the correct VM, and then we'll check the round trip time or the network connectivity just to see what that's telling us. So just to reiterate, this is a local Hyper-V VM running on my on-prem infrastructure. And this could be Proxmox, this could be Nutanix, this could be anything you want it to be. As long as we've got connectivity back to Azure, then we're good to go. All right, so if I just click here, just go to the host name. Yep, so that's ID2. So that's the machine that we connected to Azure Arc. And then if we just check the network stats and see what that's telling us. So you click here, you can see there, and we've got a round trip time of like just 7 milliseconds. It's using UDP multipath. So yeah, we know we're good there. Obviously, that's a lot less than you would be doing if you go into like UK South or UK West or anywhere. And that's the VM running locally. Now, you probably noticed it was a bit troublesome to deploy. You had to do a lot of stuff manually. You had to create the VM manually. You had to join the domain manually. I had to install the Azure Arc agent manually. And then I had to run that PowerShell script to register it against the actual host pool. So these were all the stuff, as I say, which can be automated. And that's where sort of companies like Nerdio kick in, because we can kind of automate the whole end-to-end provisioning process. And also like the host pool management on the auto-scaling and the deleting of the VMs and all that good stuff. So yeah, but if you want to just test this out and kick the tires, that's how you could do it. I'll put a link to the script to register against the host pool in my GitHub repo, just so you can test that in your own environment as well. But as I mentioned, you can run this on anything you want, because all we need to do is install the Azure Arc agent. And then as long as we can connect to Azure, then we should be good to go to deploy this on pretty much anything. So pretty exciting times. Never thought I'd see this day, but really excited to have AVD Hybrid here so I can execute running those VMs. I mean, for me as well, the fact that we can then essentially rip out like the Citrix and AEMSs of this world, because we can essentially connect to your existing virtual machines, uninstall like Citrix agent, for example, install the AVD agent, or just run the scripts on one of the VMs, and there you go. You've got exactly the same sort of hardware running. The only difference is you're connecting to it using the Windows app rather than the Citrix client. So that could save you a ton of money on licensing as well. So yeah, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you next week. So next week, what I'm going to do is I've actually got this running on Nutanix as well. So I'm learning a bit about Nutanix. So I'm going to do a video on how to deploy Nutanix. What I'll do is I'll show you how to do the end-to-end VM provision process via Nerdio through Nutanix. So that's going to be quite exciting. All right, I'll see you next week. Okay.